Yeah, but everybody's hearing what I'm saying here, so let me see. Show the taskbar. It's down here. I just have to go here and make that go away. All right, let me have your attention. I think we'll go ahead and get started. We have some people online as well. And I think the schedule will sort of be, I'll tell a little biography, I'll show a little art, I'll tell a few stories, and then Steve's going to tell stories, Juan and Jenny are going to tell stories, some people online are going to tell stories, then we'll open it up for anyone who would like to tell some stories. This slideshow will be recorded and posted online somewhere. So if I included newspapers that you can't read as fast as I put them up there, it'll all be available later. This beautiful watercoloring was painted by Beth Goldstein, in whose studio Annie did pottery in Cincinnati.
Oh, that's...
And the slide's not advancing. Okay. And I thank you all for coming and joining online to celebrate Anne Knowlton Kleene II. She was named after her grandmother. We loved her use of photography to make all the handmade cards she sent us. This one alluding to Annie's childhood act of writing pig in whipped cream on Steve's third, or was it his fourth, piece of pumpkin pie. We and countless others have been entertained by her art. Her window displays rewarded close attention as they advertised the client's products. Each of us was touched by her love and friendship, and we will miss her. But we are so very grateful for the many memories she leaves with us. Annie was born in Detroit and raised in nearby Grosse Pointe Park. Annie was the second child of Victoria Guerin Kleene and Thomas Herman Kleene. Her father was a journalist with the local Detroit papers and with magazines. He co-founded the Detroit Press Club. Her father's work centered on the automotive scene, which was appropriate for Detroit, and her mother worked in the local schools. Nan Doyle wrote, "Another story I remember was how her dad would drag her to Cobo Hall for car shows, and she'd make a killing finding coins that dropped out of other people's pockets and landed in the seats." Annie's quirky sense of humor started at a young age. Anne referred to her older brother Tom as sticks or stickages, depending on how she felt. Theirs was a very close relationship. Anne Lizard Kleene attended the Kendall School of Design in 1969, where she became good friends with Ray Rodent Rona and Linda Puppy Grant Worth. Annie and Ray and Linda, I've got this story from all three of these people. One night they were celebrating, it seems, Annie's birthday, and maybe there was some alcohol involved. It was night, and they walked over to the John Ballpark Zoo. There was no closed gate. They just walked in and looked at the monkeys. They had flashlights. And after a while, a security guy approached. He asked them what they were doing, and they said, "We're visiting the animals." He said, "The zoo is closed," and he escorted them out. Yeah. Anne was engaged to Ben Palmer at the time. He passed away in her arms while visiting Annie at her parents' home. For this or some other reason, Annie didn't return to the Kendall School of Design, and in 1972 started working as a salesperson at Wright K. Jewelers in Grosse Pointe. Here she met Kelly Ketterman, Nancy Doyle, Diane Zeeden, and others. Jewelry store work is sort of high stakes action, and Nancy Doyle writes, "Her humor and calm demeanor were particularly helpful when I knocked a glass shelf off of its bracket which resulted in a cascade of shattered Waterford crystal. In 1973, Anne married Robert Crumley. Her brother Tom married Sherry Green, and Annie became an aunt to their son Jonathan, a job she thoroughly enjoyed. Annie loved Northern Michigan. Her family vacationed there. She was a camp counselor. She worked at an inn up there. So she bought some property up there and designed and built a cabin. A lot of people have cabins and don't really use them. Hers was incredibly well used. She hosted lots of people up there. She had a guest book, people signed in. Her 30th birthday party made the newspapers and mentioned her engagement to Chuck Green. It was in her 30s that she graduated from Wayne State University with a degree in psychology and a 4.0 average, even though she was working at the time and paying her way through school. Anne and Chuck married in 1982. Annie's marriage to Chuck made Annie a stepmother to Kristen Green DeRuyter. Kristen wrote, "She loved opera and the arts and was a talented artist in many ways, in many mediums, retail styling, ceramics, pastel, paper. She sewed some of her own dresses for galas. She had a whimsical and eclectic design style that belied her somewhat melancholic nature and acerbic wit. She loved her friends and they loved her. She gave very thoughtful gifts, so beautifully wrapped you'd hate to open them. She threw a Christmas open house every year for decades and made the best Swedish meatballs, nutty noodle clusters, and intricately designed gingerbread cookies." I recently learned that Kristen made the noodle cookies and brought them over here. So we'll all get a chance to try those, except the people online. Annie's father developed dementia in his 60s, and Annie's mother went to the nursing home every day to care for him, and sort of anyone else she saw there, she was like that. When she developed terminal cancer, she checked herself into the same nursing home and died a few months before her husband in 1988. Annie's 40th birthday invitation suggests a profound need for revenge on the part of her friends. Bob and Lois Rose invited Avengers to a surprise roasting of Annie that simulated a Hollywood movie premiere. Now I'm going to jump back a bit in time to introduce you to Annie's Uncle Jack and Aunt Penny. Uncle Jack was Annie's father's brother, and the two families celebrated holidays together. Uncle Jack was a professional writer. Aside from being a stylish dresser and a ceramic artist, Aunt Penny was one of the first hospital patient advocates, and Annie sought her advice often. She's joining us today online from Cincinnati with her son Jack and daughter-in-law Jean Kleene. Penny and Annie were close. Penny's son, Steve, I guess I should be doing some identifying here. Penny's son, Steve, were similar in age to Annie, and they appreciated each other's humor. I first met Annie when Steve and I dated in the late 90s. Annie was the genealogist for all the Kleene cousin reunions. Mike Rummel's here today. He's Annie's cousin from her mother's side. The Penny Jack Kleenies had a Colombian woolly monkey that Annie remembers fondly. Animals were certainly some of Annie's favorite people. She loved them and they consistently made her smile. She shared her home with a kinkajou, here held by her mother Vicky. Benny, here in red, the raucous, oh, can I do this? Moluccan lorry bird? Moluccan lorry bird. And Hannah, the huge Maine Coon cat that Styx gave her. She had many other pets as well, and she loved the Detroit Zoo and wished she could care for their sloths. She used her design talents to raise money for the animals she loved. I just want to note that I certainly would not have drawn the back of an animal on the front of a card, but Annie knew better. Nancy Klosterman met Annie when Annie interviewed for a sales job at Klosterman's Charles W. Warren branch in the mid-'80s. Nancy was surprised by Annie's blatant lack of interest in the job she was interviewing for and just said, "What gives?" Annie said, I don't want to be a salesperson. I want to design the window displays." And somehow the next time Nancy saw her was when she came to design the window displays at Klosterman's CWW branch. Annie had landed the desired job. And let's see here. Her window displays invited close attention and definitely drew outside of the lines of the windows. Here a dog sits in one window. You can see its tail there with a ring on it, drinking out of a chalice in another. All to advertise the Bow Wow Ball fundraiser and some Charles W. Warren wares. Annie designed the invitations for many fundraisers done with the Charles W. Warren Company, as well as the displays. Tiffany and Company hired her to do the same. She met and really liked Jean Moore, the Tiffany window dresser of New York fame. Annie was the Jean Moore of Detroit. Here pieces of cubed glass of a broken windshield are glued in an arrangement that sets off Tiffany jewelry. A customer wanted to buy the display, but Tiffany would not sell it due to safety concerns, or perhaps they were just jealous that the display was selling better than the product. The medium varied from window to window, and sometimes you had to look kind of hard to see the jewelry. Here, the medium is eggshells. Here, the medium is dog biscuits. I think the medium here is hazelnuts. And here, the medium is metal things. I think I saw a light bulb in there somewhere. Here, belts become cigar smoke, cigars become cattails, and log cabins. She told stories with her displays. This is based on the record I Had a Hammer. This is based on the record Chubby Checker's The Twist. And she could easily give a sense of motion with still objects, something that kind of amazes the untalented me. Here, the Tiffany Custom Services are advertised with the trademark blue coats. Here, a flute charms a hose snake, and I had to look pretty hard to actually find the jewelry. Annie loved the work of Elsa Peretti, who worked for Tiffany for many years and designed displays to celebrate the Peretti years of work. You have to look closely for the story, but it's there. Here she took school children who had drawn pictures of their mothers and then adorned the mothers with Tiffany jewelry to make a display. You need an Annie mind to think of things like this failure to stay within the borders of the window sort of art. Again, Peretti artwork there being advertised. Photos of her friends found their way into her displays. Nancy Klosterman's wedding was celebrated by the appearance of Nancy Klosterman's wedding photo in the window of her own store without any warning. Aunt Penny was sauntering through Somerset one day and laughed to see her wedding photo advertising Tiffany products, again, without any prior knowledge. Here her mother is featured in a display of Tiffany frames. Here the story seems to be a harried hare drops a Tiffany egg and advertises a couple rings or earrings. There was, I think on the second floor of Tiffany's, there was another display area where Annie could make stories of themed dining or other activities. Here, garden hut seems to be the theme. Cramming for exams with lots and lots of detail. You could just look and be entertained for a long time. She put a lot in a small space of area. Here are the Bark in the Dark fundraisers being advertised. So by now she has her own design company. They're advertised on the left, and she also was employed by Somerset. This is from a store bag in her files, so I'm pretty sure she designed this for the Cranbrook Institute of Science. She worked with Tracy Irwin of the Detroit Historical Society to design displays and obtain products for the Detroit shop. Annie just loved Detroit and knew lots of things about it. Linda McIntosh was her boss at Somerset, where Annie did a lot more than man the cherry pickers to hang the cherry decorations. Here's the Somerset Playhouse in the middle of the mall, where Annie would select products from Somerset stores to decorate the house and probably its inhabitants, at least for the duration of the photo shoot. She designed window displays for Somerset, and I think these creatures in the mall scene look like her creations. She had photos of this. Somerset put together a city loft, which was a pop-up store in downtown Detroit, and Annie helped with the display design for that. And I don't know that this magazine dress was a part of that, but I'm just amazed you would think, I wouldn't, to take a magazine and somehow make a dress out of it with a flared skirt. Annie used Somerset products in the many show homes that she decorated, meant to give you ideas for your own home. Here she created a display of the photos of foster children looking for their forever homes. Her window displays were meant to make you look hard. One of her accounts was with Jeff Merriam and his Teacups and Toys pet boutique. Here, Annie created many memorable scenes of pets and pet products. There often was a story, and attention was rewarded with clever detail. Only Annie would put penguins in dog coats and have them consorting with the dogs themselves. Susan DiMaggio covered Annie's unusual job in a newspaper article where she asks Annie if she worries about running out of ideas. Oh my gosh, no way. There are a million things I still want to do, so many things I enjoy. Ideas come from everywhere. I still have lots of surprises up my sleeve. Annie styled houses for photo shoots. Here she did an outdoor backdoor house for this old house. When she went to style the Nautilus house, she made a good friend in Claudette Stern. Annie had a lot of friends. Here she is with Penelope. They all made very good memories. This is Susan DiMaggio as a host. Let me see, I should have a cursor here. With what Lori Rogers remembers as a celebration of October birthdays. Lori here is also a ceramic artist, and Annie spent time together with her at art fairs. Annie loved the opera. She would drive to Chicago to see the Lyric Opera. She knew all the plots and music, and she was particularly interested in the set and costume design. She was friends with Michael Hauser, the marketing manager for the Michigan Opera Theater. Annie had an encyclopedic knowledge of music from the British invasion and Motown. She definitely could have cleaned up on Name That Tune. She learned pottery and had her own kiln in her garage studio, which she called her Garudio. She did clay with others, like here with Richard Soleil. Oops. Here's some of her work. Aunt Penny, who is 100, wisely warned me, don't go through these so fast or people won't have a chance to look at things. I'll give that a shot. Always with the faces were really important in the pottery that she did. The faces have so much expression. She owned many cameras and took many pictures. And sometimes it looks like she was experimenting with things, like here with shadows and what that would do. And many of the objects were old battered things that when she took a picture of them, looked beautiful or interesting. This is a photo shoot from when the Gem Theater was picked up and moved to its current location. These photos, there are often, and not unsurprisingly, a sense of irony in many of her shots. Or the unexpected, or just the plain bizarre. And she would take a lot of these photos and put them on cards and send them to people. She was amazing at her correspondence. Annie settled in Pleasant Ridge in this home, which is packed with essentially all the things she used to decorate the windows. It was her everything was inventoried and carefully arranged. Their basement was full of shelving with carefully labeled boxes, like things like small animals in bone china. Annie loved to entertain here, and she loved to host guests, and she loved Pleasant Ridge's many huge trees, and she would take many walks. Jim and Jill Rickfelder, I believe, are here or were coming, and they bought her house. In about 2021, there were a series of dedicated friends helping Annie manage in her home with her memory loss, but it was becoming iffy. If Steve and I had lived in Detroit, we would have kept her in her house longer. The Detroit professional care coordinator I tried clearly lacked the ability to deal with Annie's anger at her disease. We needed her close enough for us to help people help her. And we figured we only had one shot at a ruse to get her to Cincinnati without her knowledge or without her knowledge of what was going to happen. So we didn't tell her friends, and that deprived them of a chance to say goodbye. And I would have done that differently. Our good friends Heather and Tom helped us set up her apartment. Leaving her in her new Marjorie P. Memory Care apartment was a slightly managed train wreck. Her anger and agony were understandably phenomenal. She called people and packed up all her apartment contents for a trip home. She unhung all the pictures and cleared the shelves and de-ornamented the chandelier. Eventually, she let Steve and I back into her life, and she was able to enjoy many things. You're about to see a lot of photos of her having a good time, and she did have those good times at MPL. But you all know this disease. A year or so after her move to MPL, one of the MPL people asked Annie if she might like to rehang some of those ornaments on her chandelier. And Annie replied with something to the effect of, "The chandelier was for happy times. These are not happy times." She moved during COVID, so it was hard to bring people in, and she was not having anything to do with us for the first few weeks. And Lori Rogers shaved the day with her online pottering lessons, including the sending of tools to do the pottery. Jessica, Paul, and Robert were professional therapists who worked with Annie once or twice a week the whole time, using art, music, or flower arranging respectively. I'll add that Robert was quite good at using occasional sarcasm to good effect. There was a large team of people of MPL who helped Annie optimize the unimaginable. The nursing aides knew Annie's quirks and supported her. Dottie, shown here, brought her dog in one of the early days, and Annie just held the dog for hours and hours and hours. MPL administrators went out of their way to help us get for Annie what we thought she needed. Debbie got Annie on some independent living trips as a volunteer helper, and workmen cut holes in the door so I could put the cat's litter robot in the utility room. Carol at the beauty salon managed to get Annie to get her hair washed, even though Annie insisted her hair didn't need to be washed. And Cece here, part of the care team, along with Tracy, helped manage help manage Annie's care and adapt it to Annie as best as possible. I want to point out here Magot. Magot was with her that first night and many others, and he will forever be my best example of unflappability. He took a lot of flack from Annie and never returned in kind anything other than care for her safety. I didn't know anything about pottery, so Heather, Annie, and I enrolled in an introductory course, and Annie sat there and listened very politely to the teacher who showed us the pedestrian steps to make a vase or a pinched pot, and then Annie would proceed to make things like you see over here. Heather, Annie, and I took up resident in Beth Goldstein's studio. Annie took lessons from an online teacher. Annie enjoyed walking dogs with young people. And she did this a lot. She really enjoyed the dogs. And in time, she did unpack enough to make her apartment a bit more of a home. Her boredom was lessened by visits of Robin and Shannon and Elena and Heather and Lizzie. A special shout out for Daniqua, who was so wonderful at getting Annie's day started during her last year. Annie loved visiting with Lucy, the dog, at Heather, Tom, and Lizzie's home. And Annie's sense of humor was certainly intact. Annie was surrounded by other residents with whom she could visit and do activities. Her best friend was clearly Mary. They bonded over their cats and their puzzles and were a great source of comfort to one another. With the help of Liza, Nicole, Lizzie, and I, Annie fed cats at a local shelter once a week. I will say she wasn't the most efficient feeder of cats, but I think she got the socialize the cats job done better than I did. Shadow, Annie's cat, shared her occasionally jaded view of the world and hated pretty much everyone except Annie. Shadow slept on Annie's bed every night. Rosie, the dog here, and her parents, Jenny and Juan Alvarez, thrilled Annie with their visits to Cincinnati. Annie enjoyed the other visits of other people and all the mail and phone calls from her friends and relatives. Annie invested time, love, and talent into her relationships, and she had many good friends. I'm going to tell a couple stories, and then I'm going to pass the mic around to a series of people, and then we'll open it up to others. Annie shot this photo as Steve and I left Aunt Penny's wedding, where the 75-year-old Penny tossed half her bouquet at me. It evidently pays to practice with shadows for just that right moment. You can see the bouquet that she caught, even though you can't see the actual bouquet. Annie forever named our car with the question, did you request gazoo plates? Steve and Annie bonded over holidays and vacations. Holidays including parents who might not maybe should be carving turkey after a number of drinks. She had an historian's bent on hanging on to and using old photos to make cards. All those photos she took could be ammunition in her hands. This card was based on the game Lie Detector and meant to celebrate Steve's birthday. Annie made the birthday cake here to celebrate a Little Rascals episode. As children at some vacation spot up north, Annie and Steve studied an old map of Michigan for town names that entertained them. And then they made recipes for drinks named after the town.
Chiquamagon tonic, Penetanguishene punch, and shown here Joppa juice.
I wasn't gonna try that. Annie always cringed when I used the like Kleenex without the X to explain how to spell our name. She made us this Kleenex dispenser. For my birthday one year, we asked friends and relatives to draw on a map of our backyard to suggest landscaping ideas, and we got a nice set of papers back with drawings on them, and then we got Annie's version. I'm gonna turn the mic over here to Steve.
Yeah, I'm Annie's first cousin, one of two cousins here today. Our families got together when we were kids, at Thanksgiving, Christmas, and some other times too. These were unusual gatherings because we kids actually wanted to spend time with the adults. The adults, most of them there were drinking, and they weren't fighting drunks, they were jolly drunks. So we enjoyed watching them. One especially good year, Annie hid a tape recorder under the Thanksgiving dinner table, and we rejoiced in that recording for many years to come. We went to family weddings too. The same crowd was often there, and as kids, we tried to figure out who they were. So there's Aunt Yvette. Is she our aunt or somebody else's aunt? And what's with that beret? She always has a beret, but every time it's a different color. Is that some sort of barometric hat that changes color with the weather? And Aunt Anne remarried late in her life, and at her reception, she threw down her cane and danced on the table. Was she our aunt? We hope she was. And many years later, Annie and I wondered whether, as seniors, we'd be able to throw down our canes and dance on the table. As for me, sorry, no dice. I'm not as spry as Aunt Anne, and I'm not as drunk either. I want to remember today how much I enjoyed talking with Annie. Her dad, Tom Kleene, was a writer, a journalist, and he was a very big man with a rich voice and a rich vocabulary. He spoke slowly, in well-composed, perfect sentences. You know, some of us can pull that off. We have a keyboard and a lot of revisions. Uncle Tom spoke that way in easy conversation. And he chose words that had a lot of charm. Annie carried on with Uncle Tom's speaking style. So, you know, it was something in itself when she looked at Nancy's license plate and said, she didn't say, do you ask for kazoo plates? She said slowly, did you request kazoo plates? And it was a ridiculous question delivered in a very refined style. And that irony was just endlessly funny. It was a style she had. Not too long ago, I imagined writing Annie's obituary with her. And so I would say she relaxed at her cottage. And she would say she lounged at her cottage, lazed at her cottage, loafed, lollygagged. And we'd go on like that for way too long. The subject matter side would have been a hoot. And hoot, that's the sort of word that Annie and her dad favored. She talked that way. We'll be surrounded by Annie's artistic creations for a very long time. Just look around this room and you see that. But what I'm come to miss is her other art, the art of her conversation. Her choice of words and her style of delivery were art. And so she could take even the most mundane topic of conversation and turn it into something delightful and engaging. That's really, it was a hoot talking to her, and that's what I've been missing the most now.
Now we're going to try something really challenging. Pat is online, and Pat and Annie met in the 9th grade and generated many, many stories. I will just tell one story about Pat, and that's that she would call Annie when Annie lived in Cincinnati and have long conversations with her. And I think having the voice, content and understanding of what they were talking about aside, because it clearly, toward the end, didn't make a lot of sense. But just hearing the voice of a friend on the line, I think really meant a great deal to Annie, and I'm really grateful for all those phone calls that Pat made. So I get to talk about this photo, and then we're gonna unmute, let's unmute her. How
I
do
unmuted me.
Oh, good, you unmuted you. Okay, and I think if I hold this mic here and you talk loud enough, it'll work. Say something.
Something.
Okay, can you hear that? Okay, all right. In this photo, which I'm supposed to talk about, Annie and Pat are in their bedroom on Whittier Road in Grosse Pointe, and she and Pat's high school boyfriend had decorated the bedroom with a huge spider web to greet Pat when she returned from her freshman year at U of M.
It was quite a surprise too. I first want to thank, before we get into the pictures, I want to thank Nancy and Steve and all the MPL staff and friends and the artists and everybody who helped, the dog walkers, helped make Annie's days as best as they could be. So, and to back up a little bit on what Nancy was saying, I can't see myself, so I don't know if I'm positioned right or not, but anyway, we did first meet in 9th grade, and I can't remember the exact circumstances other than I met Annie and thought, well, here's somebody I really want to know. She's intelligent, witty, creative, and she's talking to a dweeb like me who's wearing white socks and brown hush puppy loafers. So it just started well with that. The picture you're seeing right now is a summer vacation. And you know how in high school or during your school years, you're asked, well, what did you do in summer vacation? Well, Annie and I baked a cake. And why did we bake a cake? Our 10th grade math teacher was celebrating his first wedding anniversary on June 10th. So of course you make a 10-layer cake that looks like a 1. And we're at my parents' house making this 10-layer cake. And I think the third picture along shows the cake starts sliding. The 1 did not stay standing upright. I think Andy's showing a look of alarm, but the reason I'm even sharing this particular story with you is because the result of this whole episode became our lifelong slogan or mantra. When we took the cake to Mr. Eicher at the high school, the first thing he said when we wandered in with this, was probably a mess of a cake by then, he said, still a team. And you saw some postcards, and 31 years later, one of the postcards Annie sent to me was still a team. Mm-hmm. So we were saying that right almost to the very end of being still a team, and she'll always be my best team. I don't know.
So yeah. Ruth Harbo Richardson knew Annie before Pat, and she's here today. And she was the recipient of this large joint project on the part of Annie and Pat. Before Pat tells the story, I'm just going to point out those are roller skates under that thing.
These are a few pictures from what I'll call the construction time. And I guess in your upper left-hand corner, Annie in her red shirt with the paper mache slop. It's excuse me, flour and water, and we always mixed it up in a roasting pan. And she's looking very real, I guess. And we're getting ready to go down into the basement to create this camel that it took months and months and months to put it together, but and in the lower right-hand corner, Annie has a gilded toilet seat around her head. I'm not sure why we picked that particular thing, other than sort of like her displays. It must have started early in her life. We had a habit of picking up common objects, or what we thought were interesting objects, and turning them into something else. So I guess this toilet seat became a necklace or something. We have some other photos of different things we did with that, but these are just a few of the construction pictures of getting that camel made. We had a lot of fun doing it. 68 was a busy summer, I guess. Cakes and camels. Anything else you want to know about that?
No, that's pretty good. Thank you. Those are wonderful stories. Ray Rona and Annie's mom both liked Barbra Streisand. And here's Annie at the unveiling of Ray's tribute to Barbara, painted there, really amazing. And Annie made this tribute, which Ray brought here and is displayed on the tables behind you. And Annie made it for her mom. And Ray really liked it, so much so that her mom willed it to Ray, and Ray now has it. Ray's only telegram was from Annie Kuhn and Ben Bird to Ray Rodent on the subject of his birthday. And Ray is wearing today a tie that Annie made for him, and wrote on the back Lizard, which was another nickname she went by. Nancy Klosterman and Annie were in the Detroit Thanksgiving Day Parade for many years in many forms. These pink ones are my favorite, but they say they were very warm. These were their favorite Thanksgiving Day parades. I'll say that Nancy and Paul Klosterman were a part of the team, as Penelope and Lori and several other people here, who worked really hard to help Annie stay in her home when she was having some memory problems. Oops. Okay. The Buckwalter family anticipated greatly the arrival of a box every year from Annie with these yearly handmade Halloween costumes. I just put 3 of them up here. They were all amazing. Mm-hmm. Now I'm going to turn the mic over to Jenny and Juan Alvarez. They're going to tell a few stories. Oh, thank you. Oh, let's see. And they're going to tell me, I hope, when to push change slides.
That we became neighbors at Annie's. How many years ago?
17.
Okay. And what she liked about us most was our dogs. She took one. This is her old granddaughter. I don't know who's here. Annie joined us on many family celebrations.
Well, actually, it's sad that we got to know Annie after she started her decline, unfortunately, but
we didn't know that.
we didn't know that. And it was really great to have her be with us. She loved Rosie, who we were trying to get here this morning, but she's at the beauty shop.
But her outfit was just a variety of outfits, all from Annie and Annie's friends. And when we go on trips, we leave Rosie with Annie. And then when Rosie came back, she was so depressed. And they were a great pair. And
he said Rosie was brilliant.
Brilliant.
And of course, we
we
know different.
She was. It's not all types. This, let's see. was our Thanksgiving pie. Each person in our family made a pie. And Annie was the judge.
Yeah.
And she loved that role because there was a criteria for each pie. And she took it very seriously. She tasted everything. Everybody won. She was just a great addition to every event that we had. Even though I don't look very happy right now.
And the turkey here, I think there's another slide with the turkey. Yes. You know, Annie just threw that together for our table. And, as Nancy mentioned, her basement was full of stuff, and she could pull out something, anything, just to put this turkey together, for example. And that was very easily done, and you know, she was very happy to do that and join our little celebration.
So we spent COVID together, which was great for all of us to, because we isolated, so we got to walk together, we got to eat together, we got to do everything.
So we took Rosie to visit Annie a couple of times in Cincinnati. And it was, again, very sad for us, but also very, happy, bittersweet, yes, that we were able to see her. And at this point, I really want to say how wonderful, Nancy and Steve were to really take care of me and really, see to her needs and really take care of her at this end stage of her life. You know, it's really a lot of work, but they did it very, very happily, and you know, I think ultimately Annie did really appreciate it. She really didn't want to be there, but you know, what else can you do?
I think she's trying to tell Rosie that that's a job.
Mhm. That's all the slide. That
I'll
doesn't
go-
have to
I'll
be
go
all
back.
the stories.
Not really, no, it was fun to have her as a neighbor. She was always cheerful, she was always, happy to participate in something that we, came up with. And she was, you know, actually, I went to ask Annie if she would, babysit Rosie for us while we were on vacation for a while. And one of them said, Annie, you can say no to this. So right away, she said, no. That was Annie. No. I said, no. Okay, I'll ask you anyway. She was very happy to take care of Rosie, and she was so, she wanted us to take vacation.
Okay. I think the people online, because I forgot my logic of AV, heard none of those stories, unfortunately. I needed to have the people with the mic here where the computer was picking things up. So people online, I'm really sorry you didn't get to hear those stories. And they won't have been recorded, so we'll figure something out about that. So sorry, I think things should be okay from here on out. So let me open first online to anyone who would like to tell some stories. And we'll just unmute and let people tell some stories. So unmute and speak away if you would like to tell some stories from online. You don't have to.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, who are you?
I'm Kim, and I came to know Annie. I also did window displays, so I started at Tiffany, and I always had heard that Annie, you know, was just this wonderful icon. And so I was coming across some challenging things, and I looked her up and I met her, and we just hit it off. And how it came to be, I also had a cosmetology license, and she would have me cut her hair because she said she hated going to the hairdresser. And then from there, we would go to one of her little restaurants that was around where she lived. And there was always just great conversation. Um, and I always loved walking into her house because I loved those little raccoons, and just it was just like something magical. You would walk in, and we'd just share stories. We'd share props. I'd have different props because I freelanced also, and Tiffany wasn't the only one. But then I would help her at Somerset during Christmas, fluff like the garland, and she was just you just never knew what she would come up with. And I think that was what was just so enjoyable about her. And I just really enjoyed her company and her artistic abilities and her stories. And I remember I really liked, she had pictures in her, I think it was the bathroom, and she photocopied some for me so I could get them framed. It was like the vegetable people. And they were
Yes.
so, yeah,
I
so
remember those.
yes, so she gave me the photocopies of them, so I got them framed. And um anyways, I just have just so many special, like the gingerbread cookies I remember were just amazing. And how she'd always say good day when she'd answer her phone. And
Right.
she was just wonderful. And I just want to thank you for taking such good care of her, and all the people that took care of her, and just all her friends and family. Some of the things I didn't even know about her that came up today. So anyways, thank you so much. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. That was really, really nice.
Yeah.
There any other people online who want to
Yeah, I'll go
talk?
ahead, Nancy.
Robin. Oh,
This
good.
is
This is
Robin.
Robin Buckwalter.
Yeah, I didn't prepare anything, and I'm sorry, I'm a little choked up right now. I apologize. But Annie, I met through Tiffany's. I actually hired her, and she was so quirky. I remember thinking, is this lady going to show up? Is she going to do a good job? And she just blew it all out of the water. It was amazing. And I knew her because I hired her and recommended her, because we did the interior work as well as Jean Moore did the windows. And what I thought was just a casual relationship with a fellow employee became decades long, and we kept in touch. And she got into this habit. Even though I'm a costume designer, I never had time because I had 3 kids, and my eldest is special needs. He has cerebral palsy. I never had time to do anything because I was a working mom and I had to commute a lot into New York. And Annie said, well, would you like me to make a costume? And I said, absolutely, that's great, expecting it to be some little something. And Rigoletto showed up. They're like a 9-month-old. It was like this most amazing costume, like you said, Nancy, with all these immense little details that just blew me away. And every time and the costumes kept coming year after year after year. And I remember thinking, this lady, she's going to stop one of these days. And what am I going to say to my kids? She never stopped. The packages showed up every year for Halloween, and they were decorated, like you said, Nancy. You didn't want to open them up because they were decorated with stickers and drawings, and the kids would just wait eagerly. Colin and Brian and Carrie, they would eagerly await the Annie package every Halloween to see what would show up, because you just never knew. And she never even met my kids. I've sent her pictures year after year after year so she could enjoy it, but she never even met my kids, and yet she still kept sending them year after year. She was a remarkable, talented, funny lady, which we all know, but she will be greatly missed. She's one of the most amazing people I've ever met in my life. So, and again, thank you guys so much for taking such good care of her. I'm so glad you reached out to me so I got a chance to say goodbye to her. So thank you.
Thank you, Robin. Is there anyone else online who would like to tell some stories? Just unmute yourself and speak up. Okay, is there anyone in the room who would like to tell some stories? I think I've learned my lesson from the big mistake with the Alvarez is you'll have to walk over here to tell your story. But is there anyone here who would like to come over and tell a story or two? You don't have to, but the mic is open. Oh, good. We have a taker. I need to change the picture. Lynn Green is coming to speak. Yeah, just have a seat right here.
Thank you, Nancy and Steve. Thank you very much for putting all this together. You put so much work into honoring her memory. When I think of Annie, I think of laughter, her wit, her creativity, and her kindness. I didn't think I really had much to say, so I didn't say in advance that I was gonna participate, contribute today, but in the shower this morning, I started thinking of all these things. So I started making a list. My first memory was probably when they were married. They were married at the cottage that were shown up on Sutton's Bay. There were pictures in the earlier slideshow of the building of that cottage. I was working at a summer camp in the area, and the summer camp was on a different time zone. They didn't do the change for daylight savings. So we were an hour off, and I didn't remember that fact because I was there all summer long and just completely engrossed in camp life. So I took time off, borrowed a car, and drove to the wedding and at the cottage, and I showed up half an hour late. I thought I was half an hour early. And I was just distraught. You know, they waited for me for a little while and then they just went on with the wedding. So I walked in the middle of the ceremony and I was so upset that I had ruined their day. And Annie was so kind. She just took the time away from her wedding to console me. And I'll never forget that. Moving on. I used to house sit for them sometimes when they would go away. And I remember she would put mints on the pillow. I would stay at their house and she would put mints on the pillow. Just the ultimate hostess all the time. I remember Benny and the Cockatiels having their own room in the house in Berkeley. Benny, by the way, I don't think there was mention of it, was famous for having taken a piece out of her brother Tom's nose. And he had a scar for that for the rest of his life. I remember their Christmas open houses where they would make the doodles, whatever they're called. Nutty noodle clusters and her Swedish meatballs. I still have the recipe that she would make those every year as well. My husband Tim and I went up to visit them at the cottage one time and arrived in the early evening. And I remember that there was champagne on ice waiting for us. And I'm like, oh. It was just the little things that she did that were so memorable and so kind. She threw me a wedding shower at her house that was Berkeley also. No, that was Beverly Hills. That was the Beverly Hills home. Again, just going out of her way with the decorating and the thoughtfulness. When we did eventually get married, Annie's playful side, my mother was abhorred, but I remember her throwing rolls at her brother Tom at the wedding reception. Just lightening things up and having a good time. Didn't really care what other people thought, just, you know, she would just be herself, and it was so wonderful to be around her. I remember family meals where there was a game of pig. I'm sure several people in the family remember that, where somebody would start the game by putting their finger by their nose, and then everybody else would see that the game had started, and they would also put their finger by the nose. And the last person to do that was the pig, because they were so engrossed in their meal that they did not notice that everybody else was playing this game. My husband Tim reminded me of that one this morning. That was he like he says he lost at the first event. And then after that, you kind of became very conscious whenever you sat down to a meal, you started watching instead of eating so that you didn't lose. Annie designed a Christmas stocking that my sister Sherry then ended up making. I had 3 Christmas stockings that I had made out of felt for the family, my husband, and my 2 kids, but I never made one for me. And Sherry said, you need your own Christmas stocking. So I said, I don't know where to get the materials to do that anymore, because I would make them from a kit. Well, Annie took it upon herself to design a very cute Christmas stocking with penguins. You've seen a theme of penguins before in some of her work. And every year I still put those stockings up on the fireplace, and I think of Annie every year. Last comment I had was that Annie loved to ride bikes. She rode miles and miles and miles around the Leelanau Peninsula in Upper Michigan, where her cottage was. And I will be having the honor of spreading her ashes. At a location on the Leelanau Peninsula called Christmas Beach. At Kristen's suggestion, that was a place that she loved to be. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to tell a story about Annie? Oh, good. We have another taker, but she has to walk all the way across the room to a place where she might be heard and then not trip over these wires. This is Diane.
Yeah, I'm Diane Zidane. I just know Annie from, she worked at Rite K. I did not work there. I just went in a lot and looked at the jewelry, but my husband, Dave Frisbee, and Kelly Ketterman and Lois Rose, and they're all at the back table there with their families. All loved Annie, and I was the recipient of the stories from Annie, like what happened at the store. And I'm not gonna tell this. I wish Dave would come up and tell the Waterford Crystal shelf story. I mean, all I remember is you cannot believe what happened today, and somehow something got hit and the entire 3 or 4 shelves of Waterford Crystal just collapsed and went down. I'm like, hope that doesn't come out of her paycheck. It was an expensive accident, but they had a great time. We were always sending food in. So I think all they did at Rite K was eat food the whole time. One of my favorite stories is that every Christmas we have an annual Christmas party, and Annie and Lois would come, and they would be our stair people. And they're sitting on the stairs, and they go to the buffet, and that was their spot. They'd welcome everybody in because that's where the front door was, and you know that Annie and Lois were there to welcome you. So great memories. Her creativity is wonderful. We just saw one of the pictures of her frames from Tiffany's, one of the displays, and we saw my daughter, and Kelly and Joni saw one of their daughters, and we're like, oh, okay, I'm glad those pictures were being used well. So. We're gonna miss her.
Mhm.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
Nancy,
Yes, good.
it's
Oh,
Beth.
this is Beth. Very good. This is Beth. We inhabited Beth's studio, so
That's
she's going
one
to
way
tell
to
a few
put it.
stories.
Well, I don't know that I have so much stories because I met Annie late in her life through Nancy and Steve, who I was grateful to meet through Heather and Tom. And as one, I guess, call myself an artist. I'm not sure after meeting Annie,
You're an artist, Beth.
but as one artist to another, we did connect. We both, I think I saw in Annie the joy of doing so much what you love. And without knowing any of her past or previous life until a couple times with Nancy and Steve at their house, but mostly till recently, and until unfortunately she passed and I read an obituary that I just couldn't believe. I think that Annie showed us that you never know who may come into your life and at what time, and that no matter your situation, there's life to be had, and that we need to look at each other in that way. I think Annie lived large despite all her trials or tribulations, because all her good times fed that, and that I consider her a towering talent, not unlike any that may have been well known during her times. I think someone like Andy Warhol would have just wanted to hug her and have her join his art world. She really was that talented from what I see. So I have huge gratefulness to Nancy and Steve for allowing me to have this lovely person in my life, even for a brief time. And though she wasn't around much more after I met her, I'm stuck on Annie, and she will not go out of my heart or my mind. And lastly, another Rigoletto lover, because that's my favorite opera too. So may she rest in peace, but happiness and joy, and paint many sunsets for us. Thanks, Nance and Steve, for all you've
Thank you,
done.
Beth.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Yeah, Beth Goldstein.
Is there anyone else who would like to talk? Open mic here. Going once. Twice. Oh, very good. We have a taker. He's headed to the mic. Tell a couple stories. What I want to know is exactly what she said.
I don't have too many stories.
Okay, good.
Because growing up, I was so much younger. She was, Annie was older than me, but one of the things I remember so well when we go for Christmas, and her and Aunt Vicky, sorry, her and Aunt Vicky would make the best cookie. It's probably where she got a lot of her artistic, abilities. These cookies were about the size of an adult hand, and they were decorated so intricately. They had, the shredded coconut on for a beard, and it was a highlight of going over to Aunt Vicky and Uncle Tom's for Christmas, was knowing that you're going to get this cookie that they made. And so that was just something I always really remember about her, was helping out with that. But another thing that really sticks in my mind was because she was, like I said, they were same age as my older brother and sister. So, they would hang out with them. I'd go, and it's, oh, there's nothing to do, it's so boring. And, you know, Annie, "Oh, what's the matter, Mike?" It's, that's nothing to do. I said, "Oh, here, come here, let me show you something." And took me down the basement when I was very young and said, "Look at this." And they had a castle. I don't know what it was made of, but the drawbridges worked and all that. And she said, "Oh, would you like to play with that?" I said, "Oh gosh, is that ever cool?" So again, another thing, you know, to look forward to going there. Now it was getting it to be exciting going. And then as I got older, it was, well, that was kind of not fun. And again, Annie, "Well, you know, what's the matter, Mike?" I said, "Well, it's boring. I didn't even really want to come." So, "Well, what kind of music you like listening to?" And it was late sixties. And I said, "Well, I like the Beatles and stuff." And she said, "Oh, well, here, come on, let me show you." And she set me up with some music to listen to and all that. And she was always just so, you know, just overly accommodating to me, even though I was the younger baby cousin that, you know, wasn't old enough to hang out with them and do this stuff. But she'd always make sure I had something to do, and I was occupied and I was happy. And that's one of the things I just remember. So two things I just remember so well. And I just had to mention that, had to share something with
Yeah,
them.
that's a good
So
story and very Annie-like. I think she was just very
it
good
is.
at sensing someone else's
And-
distress
Yeah.
and being motivated to do something
And,
about it.
yeah, and
Yeah.
you know, that's talking throughout the rest of our life, we saw that type of thing, but
Yeah.
it was, that just one of the things I just remember so well. I just wanted to share that.
That's a good story. Thank you very much.
Sure, welcome.
Any other takers? Good, good. Yep. Actually, can you come to here? Because the people online can't hear, I have learned the hard way, unless you sit close to the mic associated with this.
All right, sorry.
Yep, nope, that's
But-
okay.
Hi. I'm Jill Rickfelder. I bought the house. First time I saw it, I was with my daughter visiting my brother in Ferndale. I'm nervous because I would have never thought I'd be speaking here. Sorry I came late, but I saw the house and it was just unique. And it's not the house that Annie lived in because it was sold. I was told that she had died. I didn't even, you know, and it's very white.
Okay.
They just painted over color, but I can see the builder wasn't that great or the guy that flipped it. I could see the color behind the paint and I'd be like, wow,
Why that color?
that is like, this is by the fireplace. This is in the kitchen. This is up in the bedrooms. You just see these really crazy colors. And I'm like, I really would have loved to see what the house looked like because I am not artistic whatsoever. I can't cook. I can't, you know, I barely can dress myself. So, I fell in love with the house. And for no reason, you know, my husband lived up north. We lived up in Traverse City. Who doesn't want to live in Traverse City? But I grew up in Pleasant Ridge, loved Pleasant Ridge, and that's what drew me here. My brother lived in Ferndale and I'd come and visit. We'd always go drive by the old house. And even I wasn't an east sider. We stayed on the west side. And I loved the west, east side now. Sorry, my brain's getting old. But, so, because it's so unique and I can see why she was drawn to that area and loved Pleasant Ridge. Because I loved Pleasant Ridge and, but the house is so unique and that little kiln area, like, what the heck was this? Like, why is this hole in the wall? And the Alvarez's would tell us, well, she had a pottery there, and which is very cool because my husband has that artistic ability, which I don't have. And so he's kind of drawn and he made that room into his man cave. And if you saw it, it's very unique. And so I think he was inspired by her differentness and like, and I think I'm in her bedroom and I love my bedroom. That is like my place. That's my place. And if you looked at it, I didn't decorate that room. Someone drew me to put these things there. I have plants there, I have flowers there. It's all just a green land of nature. And I love nature, but I could never have done that in my own head. So I really feel her presence in the house. And I'm very fortunate to have Juan and Jenny as my neighbors.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, and it's just, I feel that, you know, I came here and I am so amazed and what a wonderful, beautiful woman she was. And it's just, I feel honored to have her home. So.
That's very cool.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other takers for the mic? It's open and waiting. Ah, very good. You just have to give people a little bit of time. You do have to come sit up here. Here you go, Tracy.
Thank you. Hey, everybody. My name is Tracy Irwin. I met Annie, I'm not exactly sure, whenever the Detroit shop started. I can't remember the year, but she and Linda came to the Detroit Historical Museum and wanted to work with us to populate the shop early on, which was supposed to be a temporary shop initially, and I'm really happy it stayed on, it's doing so great.
I'm just moving it a little away
Oh,
from you.
am I too loud?
It was, yeah,
Sorry.
you're good. It's good now.
I'll talk softly.
Oh.
But so we just struck up a friendship. She, you know, I work in the exhibition department, so I design windows and I design our exhibitions, and she has so much knowledge. She had so much knowledge. She sort of became a mentor of sorts, and I would reach out to her and ask her questions. And you know, while she was doing the Detroit shop, I didn't really have a lot to do with it. I more loaned things, and it was her vision. But I got to spend a lot of time there, and then later met her at Somerset often for lunch. Then I had my son, and I brought him with us, and she'd always, you know, she'd always want to talk to him. He's in his, you know, he's in his stroller, and she's having full conversations with Daniel, and you know, he was just a smiley baby, but it was just really wonderful. She just became somebody that I really looked forward to having conversations with. And taught me a lot about design. And that was something I really appreciated, because as a younger designer at the time, I didn't really have too many people to go to for that. And she's very humble. You know, I was always asking her questions, and, you know, so thankful that she would give me this information. And she's like, oh, you know, it's no big. I'm like, no, this is hugely helpful to me. And so that's really all I wanted to share. And, you know, I was sorry that we had lost touch for a while, and I didn't know that she had been ill. But really very grateful to you both for everything you've done.
Oh, thank you. Thanks, Tracy. Okay, someone else sitting out there ready to tell a story?
That's me.
Very good. Heather with the story. You have to sit here.
I will.
Because I think the mic is there.
Okay, so I only met Annie once before she moved to Cincinnati, and that was at
Oh, yeah.
Steve and Nancy's wedding. And I did help to get her positioned in her new
Yeah, you did.
accommodations. And then we would go over when we could and take her for walks with our dog and try to come up with things to entertain her. Initially, she could do quite a bit of artwork, and we did pottery and some other things. And then eventually she got to where she would say, for some of our rather inane projects, what's the point of this? And, you know, the nice thing that I remember about her is she'd be talking, and then you could just see that little acerbic part of her personality pop out. But it made you happy because
Yeah.
you knew she was in there.
Yeah.
And we enjoyed her company very much.
That was good. Thank you. Anyone else's hand gonna raise up there? Okay, I think we'll finish with just a moment of silence. And I'll close by thanking you all online and all of you who came here for celebrating Annie. She really was an amazing person. And we will all miss her a great deal, but we're very glad to have known her and have the stories that we have. I'll go ahead and end the Zoom now, and there will be a recording, and I'll post that somewhere, and we'll take some pictures, and you don't get to eat, you online people, the nutty clusters, but we'll tell you about it. Let's see if I got everything. Oh, wait, there's one new message. I can't manage a chat. Okay. All right. Thank you very much for coming. I will stop sharing and end the celebration.